Good evening, everybody. Welcome to McDuff Lives. I'm John O'Loughlin, and the bird calls you just heard are the Osprey calls. The Ospreys are back here at Cobb Island for the summer, and that's one of our little traditions here at the channel. We have our website called screamingospreys.com, and there's a lot more to learn about that if you want to go there. But tonight, very happy to welcome for the first time to McDuff Lives, Courtenay Turner of CourtenayTurner.com. And so nice of you to join me, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, how are you tonight, Courtenay?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I've looked at your website and I've watched a little bit of some of your videos that you make, and I see you have pretty eclectic tastes like I do in terms of what we jump into. Some of the things that I thought were very, very interesting are connected to Edward Bernays' psychology and mass manipulation of populations by psychological and other means and things like that interest me a lot. Also, I think it's fascinating your take on culture generally, which I just want to ask you about and learn from you. But let's start off with a bit of an introduction, if you don't mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got to be uh, uh, a great podcaster with such a terrific following.
Thank you so much. So I started podcasting, I guess it's 2 years ago now. It was just the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And I was living in California. I was in Santa Monica, and the measures around the COVID were quite draconian. So everything was locked down and everybody was wearing masks. And that was really, really depressing for me, as I think it was just really dark for most people, but I'm visually impaired and I'm hearing impaired. So I actually learned how to speak by reading lips, and I wear hearing
Oh,
aids
wow.
yeah. So I wear hearing aids bilaterally now, but I actually learned how to speak by reading lips, and I didn't get them till I was almost 6 years old. So the nonverbal cues largely impact my discernment of speech. And I didn't realize how much I still depend on that until I couldn't see anybody's faces anymore. And people would get very frustrated with me because they could see by my body language that I was hearing something, but obviously I had no idea what they were saying. And they couldn't seem to understand why, if I heard that, I wasn't understanding them, and I had to keep explaining that just because it makes sense, even if I heard no sound in this situation, it obviously makes sense that you're speaking, but that doesn't mean I have discernment of speech and clarity of speech. So it was very, very frustrating for me. And I'm also blind in one eye. So everything was shut down. And I'm an aerial acrobatic performer. So I obviously all of my speaking and aerial performances were canceled. But not only that, but that outlet is a huge part of my like creative process and creative outlet. And I wasn't able to do it because I see monocularly. So, most people who see binocularly, I have about 60% of the peripheral vision that who sees binocularly would have. So when you put a mask on me, because it's so close to my eyes, it further reduces my already limited peripheral vision. So then imagine climbing 26 feet in the air and inverting. It's just really difficult. And now the teacher's wearing a mask, or the people around me are wearing masks, and I can't understand them. So that's just incredibly dangerous. So I wasn't able to do that, and that was very frustrating for me. People were getting arrested for wearing masks, like for not wearing masks, just hiking on or walking on the beach, hiking on the mountains by themselves, walking on the beach. So I would go an hour and a half away just to be able to go for a hike so I could see a friend's face and have conversation. So all this to say that it was very isolating, very depressing. And while I think that is true for many people, I think it was more extreme for me. The other thing is that because I was wearing the mask, I was developing these chalazions. So for those who are not familiar with the term, it's essentially like a sty, but it's in the center of your eyelid. And there's lots of studies. I've actually done an article on this, that the masks were causing this for a lot of people. But unfortunately for me, it was causing this in my eye, the eye I see out of. And so I had an experience. There were many final straws. It took me a while to make my final exit out of California. But one of the final straws was me going to the eye doctor because I was concerned this was in the eye that I see out of. And they had an empty waiting room. It was a big waiting room, completely empty. And they informed me that I needed to wear a mask in this empty waiting room. Every time I put the mask on, my eye would start burning. And so I finally said to them, I don't think I can. The reason I'm here is because I'm getting these chalazions. I point to my eye. It's very visible. It's very uncomfortable. And I said, but this is my good eye. Like, I'm really concerned. So I took the mask off. I'm sitting in the waiting room. They had security come up and they literally circled me like in a semicircle. And it felt like a chant. And they just kept saying, comply, comply, comply. Until
Oh, no.
yeah, like
Oh,
literally something out of a dystopian movie, and it was just comply, comply, until finally somebody broke what felt like it was a chant and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, if you do not comply and put on your mask, we're going to have to escort you out and have you arrested." At which point I left the building. But all this to say that I was also I was a CrossFit coach at the time. I was fired from both gyms. I can't prove it, but I'm 99.9% sure it was over politics. And I found myself with a lot of time, and I thought it would be a great time to start writing. But after 10 hours, I found a lovely white screen staring back at me and decided that maybe this wasn't the best time. So I think I was just feeling kind of the pervasive, I'm an empathetic person. I was feeling not just, my own anxiety, but just the anxiety all around me and the despair. So I felt that knowing the creative process, it's pretty hard to force that sort of thing. So I decided that day that I would order some books to read. I ordered 11 books and I started reading a lot. And at that point, I found myself having this desire to talk to people about all these great things that I had read. And there were a lot of people who had reached out to me suggesting that I start a podcast. And I had initially thought that that was a terrifying idea, but then it dawned on me that even if I never aired them, if I just did these conversations, even if it was just on a computer interface, that having naked face conversations might do wonders for my morale and really help me. So, emotionally, spiritually. So I started just recording conversations, and I really loved it, and I started airing them, and people enjoyed them, and so here we are. We kept going. We're at like 235 episodes later. So, and I've now started several other shows as well. So,
are you other shows, are they particular themes?
Sort of. So one of them is under an umbrella called Pirate Stream Media. It's with two other guys. One of them is Ryan Christian of The Last American Vagabond. The other one is Scott Armstrong, who is Rebunked News. And that one we cover a lot of more topical news of the day, more current events type material. But we do it it's a show called The Dialectical Dissident. So Pirate Stream Media is an outfit that we're creating, and it's in really early inception stages, but the vision for it is that it will create an aggregate for the alternative media because they're trying so hard to atomize us. And so therefore we can't, collaborate and, cross-pollinate and work together. And so I think that's really important that we combat the atomization of the alternative media and be able to support and work together, support each other and work together. So that's the vision, and it's in really early stages, but we have a show called The Dialectical Dissidents, which seems to be really well received. And that is where we do take, as I was saying, the current events of the day, but we take it from outside of the mainstream narrative. So we're kind of the mindset that they tend to force us into these false dialectics. And they have these narratives that they try to sell, and then they have the counter narratives, and they want the people on the other side, whatever other team to take that bait. And we really try and take and objective as much as we can. Obviously, we're human beings. We all have our own biases, but we try and take a perspective that might not be within one of the main narratives that they're trying to sell us. Or, if we do agree with the narrative, then, to put that forth, but really not to be just parroting whatever, because we see it on both sides. I think it is really this false dialectic that they're trying to put us in. So that's kind of one of our taglines, is the two-party illusion. So that's kind of the premise behind that show. Then I have a show that we're actually doing a live stream this weekend. We're doing this Sunday at 4:45 Central Time, and that is a roundtable female discussion group. And so that's really just kind of, I always say it's like a counter to The View. It's called The Right Voices, but it's really not a counter to The View. It's very different from The View. The only similarity is that it's a female roundtable discussion group. But we do much more diving into alternative narratives and alternative history, and what people might call conspiracy theories. But it's really, we do a little bit of theorizing and speculating, but it's really all based on some of the encrypted history. So I have that show, and then I have obviously the Courtenay Turner podcast, and I have a show called WIM, What is Movement? And that one I started years and years ago, but it's been a very slow one because it's more of a show, so it really has more production value behind it. Unfortunately, that requires some funding, which I need to source more of, but I do have a home for it now. We're in the process of putting it up on the Way Forward platform. And that's a show where we explore ways that movement helps people to heal emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so I interview movement artists, athletes, and really about their journey and ways that movement has helped them to heal and overcome in other areas of their life. And then I will be starting a 1-hour block show for both a radio series and a public access. So so we have a bunch of stuff going on, and I have an event. So June 3rd and 4th, we're doing Rebels for Cause. Cause stands for Creative Artists Uniting for the Sovereignty of Everyone. And you can go to rebelsforcause.com, and that will show you several of the artists and speakers that we already have lined up. And that'll be a 2-day event with several speakers and several musicians. I'll be doing aerial acrobatics. We have some comedians we're in talks with, and some like physical artists, like who might do an auction, that sort of thing. But really, it's to inject some freedom, hope, truth, and the messaging of personal sovereignty into the culture. So
That's June the 3rd, is it?
June 3rd and 4th. Yep.
June 3rd and 4th. And where's that?
It's going to be right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. So the actual location is to be determined. We do have it locked right now, but a lot of it's going to depend on the demands of the ticket sale. So hopefully it's probably going to stay there, but it's to be determined right now. So yeah. But either way, it'll be in the Nashville area. Yeah. So.
Well, you've got a really interesting and amazing story, and one through which you really have had to suffer. And I personally hadn't really sunk in how difficult this COVID would be with the masking for people like yourself, for people who are even unable to hear it all. There must have been some pushback, but I think California is really one of the real extreme woke jurisdictions that didn't have much, any sympathy. It's just what you did tell a story that sounds like it came out of a dark science fiction novel, and it really did. And this is real, and the science that I've been studying, the medicine of it, if we can ever get to the bottom of it, it certainly does look like this had a lot more to do with psychological control than it had to do with physical health.
Absolutely. I would agree.
why don't you take that and fill out your thoughts on that part of it?
Yeah, they beta test things, and I do think that this was very much a beta test that was rolled out for compliance. I don't think this was the last of what we're going to see, but I think that they've been planning this for a very, very long time. So I don't know how freely I can speak. So if you want me to speak in code, I will, but you advise me. Um,
Well, let me then just clear that up right now,
yeah.
because I am in the middle of a process of moving from YouTube to making Rumble my primary
Okay.
platform, and the most recent reason for that is I'm now on a 2-week strike on YouTube on my main channel.
Okay.
But I'm
Yeah.
also broadcasting on my backup channel, which is McDuff Lives 2 on YouTube,
Okay.
because I need to have that contact with YouTube
Hmm.
folk and to say, hey, we're in the process of going over to Rumble. I don't worry about what we say on Rumble, but I wouldn't want to lose my backup channel on YouTube. So
Sure.
let's be somewhat circumspect tonight, but with
Okay.
the idea that I'm moving away from that as fast as I can, my friends, and we will be talking frankly here as soon as possible.
Awesome. No, I appreciate and respect that. So the first patent for a spike, we know what we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
It was for canines, and it was in 1991. So just to give you a sense of how far back some of this research goes, and I know people like to say, well, it's just research, but research is very expensive, and it is in many ways it requires a lot of resources. So typically there's not just random research, especially not by high profile people, unless there's some sort of a purpose behind that research. So there was also some government entities that are involved in, what we're now talking about as a kind of gene therapy type of injections, and they were working on things back in 2017 under the guise of curing cancer, which they did not find any progress with, but they used that, and they had very dismal results, but they used that same technology to roll out the cure for what was, the Great
Yeah.
Crusade.
Well,
So, these are just a few examples. I could go on and on, but
what I wanted to ask really about was
Mhm.
about the masks, because I think that, what had happened to you
Mhm.
literally also happened to everybody else in a psychological sense.
Yeah,
And
so the masks,
especially
I mean,
children, right?
yeah, the masks are a symbol of slavery, right? And they are a symbol of submission. They strip you of your voice, right? What do you do when you want somebody to stop speaking? You cover their mouths. So they were a symbol of slavery and submission. They are also a way of weakening someone's immune system. So we expel bodily waste through our exhalation, and people don't think about this, but if you put a mask on, you're now inhaling your bodily waste back inside you, which, I could use a pretty crude analogy, but we wouldn't go to the bathroom and do that. So that's essentially what you're doing though. When you exhale, that's how we get rid of some of that waste. And then now we're forced to breathe it back inside us. So it was a way of weakening immune system or just health in general. But certainly it's definitely symbolic of slavery and of weakening people's voices. And it's also a way of creating depersonalizing people. There's a lot of things going on with it. So it depersonalizes you, like a non-player character, because it dehumanizes. And we saw this with children during that time period, how much of their social and cognitive development became delayed as a result of not having the facial interaction. So it does dehumanize and depersonalize people. So now they can roll out things that are incredibly inhumane and treat people in a very inhumane fashion, but they can do it behind a mask, right? What do robbers do? They wear masks to cover their faces. It strips the identity. There was also a way to improve facial recognition technology. Part of the 6 feet apart and then having partial face covering strengthens the data collection, because now they're forced to do more advanced facial recognition technology. So I think there was a lot of things at play, but from a psychological perspective, it's very dehumanizing, and it takes away that. So we think that so much of our interaction comes from visual and auditory processing, but as humans, there's way more than that. There's a lot to be said for the nonverbal cues, the facial recognition, the electromagnetic communication, and things that we just don't necessarily think about, or we aren't taught regularly. And the masks take away a lot of that. So.
One of the interests you had included the words individual sovereignty, and
Mhm.
this, I think, is another aspect of it that we can talk about of the current um, situation in which they want to do gene therapy.
Mhm.
It is a way for them to get us to give up our individual sovereignty.
Mhm.
In that we will now, instead of the default being I can say no, the
Right.
default is now going to be you have to say yes.
Right.
And if you don't say yes, well, they're going to escort you out and
Right.
maybe not treat you too well.
Right.
So this is what are you doing in terms of trying to promote the idea of sovereignty on an individual basis?
On an individual basis, I mean, my tagline under my podcast is to inform, inspire, empower. So really, my hope is that by putting out information that people might not be aware of otherwise, it will help. It will inform them and hopefully inspire them then to take some sort of action with what they know, and empower them with tools to do so. So I mean, that's really my hope for what I can do. I go pretty deep down many rabbit holes. So, and I also try to uncover a lot of the darker, more occulted roots of a lot of what's happening today, because I think that I believe, that what do they say? Like, there, it was the end of the book. None dare call it conspiracy. They said conspiracy can only survive in the dark, and so I always add onto that, so, and therefore it's incumbent on the light to shine on it to expose it. And so that's what I hope to do. And I think that by doing that, people can take ownership of free will. And I hope that I can stress that upon people. It's not for me to tell people what to think or what to do, but hopefully I inspire them to think and to take action, because I do think we were all endowed with free will, and that they're trying to strip that from us. When I think about the spiritual battle that I do believe we are immersed in, I think the light versus the dark can kind of be reduced to, or boil down to, this battle between people who believe in free will and honor that amongst humans, and want to see that propagated and encouraged and respected, and the people who want to strip humanity of free will, and thereby use that lack of free will to control them.
Well, my friend David Underdown was on the show last night. We were talking about
Mhm.
very similar issues, and one of the psychological concepts that came along during my lifetime was the idea of alpha and beta.
Mhm.
We say males, but the alpha personality, the
Mhm.
beta personality.
Right.
And one of David's comments was he he had to adjust his thinking to account for the fact that there are a lot of people out there
Mhm.
that, well, perhaps, want to be an alpha male, but an awful lot of people don't, that they really want to be the betas. And
Right.
that's who they are, and they feel that way. And they want to be part of the chorus. They want to be part of the support team. They
Mhm.
want to do their part to make the whole shebang successful. And just tell me what you need me to do, and I'll take care of it. And
Right.
these folks are like, well, honestly, they're different from me
Mm.
because I want to I really do think that I'm an alpha,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that everybody else can be converted into an alpha just because I think there's something they need to do. So where I'm tying this into what you just said is that there's crowds and crowds and crowds of people out there that are waiting for leadership, that are waiting for something to click that says this is the mission, and now I'm a part of the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is where we have to head, I think, is to uh, well, like you're talking about with your pirate association.
Pirate Stream Media. Yeah.
Right. So we have got to again, and I think it's happening. I really do. There's some fantastic shows that I'm sure you know about that I don't know about. There's some that I know about that you might not know about, but all over the world, and especially as long as we have a relatively free platform like Rumble somewhere that we can keep on working together and make this thing happen. But again, how do you see the idea of approaching, say, folks that you might call woke or just your general liberal friends? Because I have struggled through COVID with my liberal friends that they're
Mm-hmm.
all completely, think I'm crazy not to not to be one of them. But again, I'm kind of more of a loner anyway, and that shows perhaps that they are more of a beta type. Anyway, I'll enjoy your comments on that.
Um, well, firstly, I'll address the last part of what you're saying. Like, how would you approach some of the more liberal or more woke type people? Honestly, I think the best approach with them is to plant seeds. I don't think that you're going to convert somebody's overnight, because really what it requires is a paradigm shift. Their entire worldview has been conditioned. They've been programmed over and over and over again throughout the years, and that has led them to the worldview which they possess today. And that's probably not going to be reframed in one conversation or in an instant. So I do think the best thing to do is just plant the seeds with them. And you never know what seeds will sprout, and you never know when those seeds will sprout. I've had experiences talking to people who have, as you said, they told me I was crazy. They thought I was a good human. They've decided I'm a bad person. That's the the typical ad hominem approach, and it's kind of the moral fallacy. Like, they decide you're a bad person, therefore everything you say must be wrong, which is not true. Even people who you deem bad can actually say things that are true. But I think that that's probably the best approach with them. As far as the beta versus alpha, it's interesting. I don't think, as not to discredit that concept, but I think a lot of it has to do with personal responsibility. And a lot of people in general are afraid of taking responsibility, and they are waiting for someone. They have kind of a savior complex. That's a little bit of what you were alluding to. They're looking for a leader to guide them. And we see this on both sides of the aisle. We see this, in many different narrative circles and different political circles and different spheres, where they're looking for someone to guide the way and lead them. And really, I think what we need to do is learn how to, whether or not you're an alpha or a beta, I think is a little bit irrelevant in this regard, because while the beta may not be leading the pack in combat, there's still a lot that they can do that will make a great impact, but they need to take personal responsibility. And I think everybody can do what it is that their proclivities lend them to do. So for some people, that's going to be writing and researching. For other people, that might be farming, so that they can provide for their family, or maybe it's creating a homestead so they can, do that for others as well. Uh, there's many. I could give lists and lists of examples, but I think it's more about personal responsibility. Everybody needs to figure out what it is that they can do, because I do think we are really in a very, it's a difficult time. So it's you could see it as a world war of sorts. It's definitely a psychological war, information war, spiritual war. I think all of those things are kind of unequivocal. So, yeah.
If I may, my first thought when I heard when you started talking was about, yes, I have I understand the empathy that we need to have in order
Mhm,
to accept that people are in this frame of mind because
mhm,
they've been in it their whole lives, and
mhm,
you don't want to let go of it. And
mhm.
because it's like the floor comes out from under you and you could fall. It's like, I don't have any.
It's devastating. Yeah,
Yeah, it's terrifying.
totally.
And but look at it from the point of view of a average white conservative
Mhm,
couple, you know,
mhm,
being shamed by a woke person for racism
mhm,
or for whatever else they want to throw at him, MAGAism, or just the whole 9 yards of what's wrong with those folks. Well,
mhm,
to me, that is the older culture, and that
mhm,
culture had flaws and
mhm,
still has flaws, such as racism. And
mhm,
but when you are in a culture in which your parents and grandparents and great grandparents were told that there are different races and you have to protect one race against another race because that's the way that they survived to get to where they got to in the world. And it's a false premise, but
mhm,
it's part of the premise that they grew up with.
mhm,
So how can we not also try to have the woke people have some empathy to the people that they're saying that they're going to take away the floor out from under their feet because everything they grew up with is wrong. And
mhm,
I think there's a lack of empathy from that side toward the conservatives that is emphasized over and over and over again in the media because every time you talk about conservative, they're going to slap a racist label right on top of it, and kill the conversation. That's what the media does. So I pardon me for making my own point there, but I do think that everybody is being manipulated to not have empathy for folks that happen to be on the opposing side of an argument.
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely true. They label anything that they don't agree with or they want to control, they label it racist. I mean, it's just a tactic. It's they do this is essentially this is just like their playbook that they changed the name of what they're going to call people, right? It was like politically incorrect back in the 90s. That was kind of their big term, right? And now it's racist. Everything's racist or um, they use these words and it's just a conspiracy theorist, right? Which we know the CIA weaponized that term back in 1957. It was document 1035-960 countering the Warren Commission, and it was to avert any investigation into Kennedy's assassination. And we've now come out as public knowledge. I've been talking about that for years because I know they weaponized the term, and it was just a way of discrediting the conversation. It happens on the even in like the what they call the truther community a lot. The term that they use to try and shut down any discussion and discourse is controlled opposition. Anybody they don't like, it must be controlled opposition. And really, I think the big problem is yes, I agree that these people don't have empathy. I kind of understand why they don't have empathy because they've been completely brainwashed and programmed. So I'm not justifying it, but I know why. They've literally been brainwashed. So I don't expect them to have any capacity to understand. That's why you plant the seeds to try and educate them and hope that you break through some of their programming, because that's really what needs to happen. There needs to be a deprogramming so they can start to rediscover their critical thinking skills. And through that, there's the hope that they would find some empathy. But more than empathy, it's really curiosity. I think that empathy would flow from curiosity. If there was a genuine curiosity, and not just this ardent and fervent kind of assumption that you're right about everything you think. We humans know a lot less than we claim to know. So it would be great if people would engage in discourse as though not to abdicate their views. I think people should be passionate about their views. Hopefully, they've been well thought through, well researched, but open to the possibility that as new information comes forth, those views may shift. Maybe they will stay the same. Maybe they'll be reinforced and they'll become even stronger. But there's always the possibility that with new information, new evidence, new data points, hey, maybe I missed something over here. And I think that that's healthy discourse. And unfortunately, we're in an age where the mockingbird media has literally programmed people, and that is by design. So there's not going to be a whole lot of empathy. When I'm talking to people who I know don't agree with me, are very much on the polar opposite of the spectrum of what I may think or believe on a specific point. Or if somebody, and I treat these two people very similarly. It may be somebody else who just doesn't know a whole lot. It's going to be very hard to get them to see outside of a box when they have no idea there's a world out there. It's like the allegory of the cave. They've been staring at the shadows. They have no idea there's a world outside the cave. And if you try to tell it to them what it's like outside, they're going to think you're absolutely crazy. So instead of expecting them to see things exactly how I do, I just try and plant some seeds by giving them droplets of information that I think are important to them. So I really try to, from their perspective, what might be an issue or something that is very personal to them, and plant a seed in that arena. And usually that will at least get them to listen, because a lot of times it's hard to get somebody who is that antagonistic to even listen to what you have to say, let alone have empathy. So.
I guess I'd like to broaden the conversation to some more. Well, we talked about individual sovereignty.
Mhm.
How about national sovereignty? It seems to me that one of the other things that's going on right now is a brutal attack on the idea of national sovereignty. And I spoke to Hervoye Morich
Mhm.
yesterday,
Okay.
and one of his opinions is that we've already passed through that. The national sovereignty is gone. That we really are operating under a one world system already, and it's just we're over the hump now. He didn't say there's no hope, but he's also pretty convinced that we're already there. He's a person with an incredible resume, and
Mhm.
has
Yeah.
been all over the world studying this stuff. So
Yeah.
I have to
I've
reach
been on
out.
his show. He's great. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and he
Yeah.
is. He's a terrific journalist, and
Yeah.
and I was I spend a number of hours with my good friend Harley Schlanger of the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche organization, and they're very concerned about sovereignty, but I don't think that they have any sense that it's already all the game is over. That they're still in there punching, and I think I have always been too. What is your view? Do you think that sovereignty is a thing of the past, or is it something worth trying to fight for? And I myself, being I'm a Constitution person. To me,
Mhm.
what we really can't let go of is the U.S. Constitution. Now, that's my personal view. What's yours?
So I absolutely think it's worth fighting for. I mean, a noble cause is always worthy of fighting, regardless of the outcome. So I absolutely think that we continue to fight for national sovereignty, because I think national sovereignty, especially in the United States, is it's really crucial to the preservation of free will of humanity. So I definitely think we do. Do I think it's already been dissolved? I think that's debatable. I don't think it's been dissolved to the point of no return. That's what I would say. I think it's actually quite nuanced. So we know that that's their goals. They've written them out in the plans. Their goals are a one world governance. So they already talk about this. I think it's so interesting how a lot of people on the right love to champion how Elon Musk called into the World Government Summit, right? And he was arguing against the global governance. But meanwhile, did they not miss that it was called the World Government Summit? That's what it's called. So there is already an entity, that thinks there's a world government. And, even though they like to label it a conspiracy theory, but when you look at some of these videos from the World Economic Forum, they literally will say New World Order, these are their plans. They will say global governance. But if you label it that, if you take those exact clips and label it that, then they will slap on there that it's a conspiracy theory. Even though this is from the horse's mouth, exactly what their names are and what the plans for those names would outline. So I think we look back at, we look now at what's going on with the WHO and their pandemic treaty, their international health relations amendments, and some of these things really would absolve any notion of national sovereignty. All they'd have to do is declare that we are in some sort of a pandemic or health crisis, and that would give them complete control. And as we saw in the past few years, this would be a ramped up version of that. They can basically label whatever they want. The last few years, we have lots of, even the CDC said that it wasn't really, it couldn't classify as an epidemic, let alone a pandemic, but they took they took the license to label it that and execute their measures anyway. But back in 1952, I believe it was under Truman, they had already put in provisions in the WHO documents that really did do away. That's part of what paved the way for something like the past 3 years to occur. So this is what I try to impress upon people is they play the long game. These plans have been very, very long in the works. When you go back to, and I think it goes back way even further than this, but if you go back to some of the Illuminati documents, they talk about the New World Order. Essentially, they outline their 7-point plans, and they talk about one of the things they want to do is overthrow all governments, all religions. Does this sound familiar? So I could go through the list, but it's very similar to now we have the 17 sustainable goals, but which are the UN agenda. So I know that in a lot of the writings, I think it was Jacques Attali, he talked about how by 2050 there will no longer be United States of America. No, by 2030 there would be no United States. By 2050 there would be no nation states, and it would just be remnants of power blocks. So all this is a very long-winded answer just to tell you that I know that that's their plans. Attali, Kissinger, Brzezinski, they've all written about this. The World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab is talking about this. A lot of these quote unquote elites have mentioned that that is their plan. And certainly the WHO documents, if they go through, would put us in a very precarious position where the national sovereignty is at stake. Do I think that there's a potential to reinforce the sovereignty and to claim whatever sovereignty we do have? I absolutely think so. I think that if more people become aware of these WHO documents, they fight against it. They encourage our, government to stay out of those treaties and not to agree to both the health regulation amendments as well as the those lines in the even if they agree to the pandemic treaty, which I don't think they should at all, but even if they did, to make sure that it doesn't mean that it gives a jurisdiction to the WHO over our own government. And I think the other thing that we can do here is we do have the 10th Amendment, so states' rights really should be some sort of a checks and balances. That was the purpose. And they should have some sort of a resistance against measures of both the federal and whatever type of, worldwide governance or council that gets created or thinks that they're already in control. There should be localized resistance to that, because we do have local governments. So I think that that's something we can do, and that I would really try to encourage all people to, impress upon their state legislature to take measures that buffer them against any kind of control from larger top-down forces.
Right, well said. And a lot of people are concerned about it, but not enough people are aware of it
Yeah.
to be concerned about it. And some people think, oh, well, that's just we can always override that. We are we're the government. Our Congress can override it. We don't have to worry about what the WHO does. And there's a lot of people that just don't understand, that, well, you also got to look into the Senate, the treaty powers and the ways to get around things that have been tried in the past and done. So absolutely right. The world situation, then let's expand it a little bit, one more step.
Yeah.
Wh-
Well,
How,
sure.
how does this horrible war in Ukraine fit into their plans, in your opinion?
I think it's multifaceted. I mean, Ukraine has kind of been the hub for a lot of money laundering. Certainly, there. I mean, we now know it's not a theory about the Biden crime family and their ties to Ukraine. Certainly, a lot of the biolabs, and we funded a lot of those through our military-industrial complex. So it's been a hub for a lot of the corruption, and it has also been a place where our CIA has been fighting a proxy war since possibly longer, but definitely 2014. So we've stoked a lot of those tensions, and I think it's part of a larger plan. I mean, one, definitely to funnel some of the more dubious types of behaviors and actions that are taking place, and they take them, offshore. But I think it's also to stoke these tensions between the East and the West, and to get the battles between, because ultimately they want to pit the East and the West against each other so that they can. I think ultimately, then they're going to swoop. One, they want to get a world war, because it's better to have your enemies doing your bidding for you. So if they can get us to fight amongst each other and divide, they can conquer. They can cause destruction, lots of death and chaos. That's a perfect breeding ground for usurpation. They can come in with their solution, quote unquote, and I think their solution is the one world government, and the control, the technocratic control. I think that they want to put us into a transhuman leading to a post-human neo-feudalistic system that's controlled by an AI that they program. And I think that's really their ultimate goal. And it's much easier to do if people are in a state of fear, uh, despair, depression. The population's been reduced, and chaos. So if they're desperate, then the powers that be have much easier chance to control. So if the masses are desperate.
I think it's really impressive that we have you here, Courtney, talking about this really dark future, and let it out there, because I mean, it's not just you, it's not just me. There's thousands of us doing this now, and to be forewarned, to see that this is really coming. It's not. This is not Star Trek. This is real.
This is real.
And just and that descending totalitarian net all over us with the technological controls. I see how they well, these 15-minute cities that they're planning, take away your ability to leave a certain radius from your house. Um, uh,
Horrifying.
it's horrifying, and at least some of us are getting the word out, but most people are thinking, oh, they'll never do that. At the same time, they probably have seen on the news by now a scene from China, a street scene where there's hundreds of people walking around, and they all have these little digital boxes around their faces with a number on them. so that you can see that, oh yeah, they're computer tracking every Chinese person in this city. They've all got a number. They've all got, the tracking on them. And what's why won't they do it here? They will do it here
Well,
if we don't intervene.
absolutely. They're doing it in the UK right now. It's really being aggressively rolled out. They're already doing it in the United States, and people who think that they're safe in a this is part of the problem, I think, with the United States is a lot of people we have the illusion of having a lot more freedom than we actually have, and that really pacifies people. And it is happening not just in blue cities. I mean, there are red states where you're seeing these 15-minute cities pop up and all these, blue light cameras all over the place. And it's really setting the stage for this uh, surveillance state. But it's not just a surveillance state. I think people don't really understand the ramifications of geofencing. And the geofencing really would limit their mobility. These are in the plans for the 2030 agenda. They talk about having these no crossing zones, and where freedom of movement would be restricted. Now, freedom of movement, you talked about the Constitution, and I think fundamentally the Bill of Rights is really what's being attacked. And I think that that's what needs to be bolstered. But our Constitution does say that we have freedom of movement, right? And that's one of the things they are actively and aggressively trying to strip with these 15-minute cities. It's really egregious, and it's really terrifying. And then, of course, they want to create, you talked about China, where China really is the technocratic model, I believe, for what they want to roll out across the world. But let us not forget that it's the United States that put China in the power that it's in currently, right? We remember the Kissinger rapprochement plan with Nixon.
Yeah.
It really did build up China to be what it is today. China would not likely, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but it's unlikely that it would have the power that it has today without us. And I think that's always been kind of part of the plans of the Anglo-American establishment. There's a kind of our military industrial complex is working in a worldwide kind of coordinated effort. There's certainly our OSS was created by the MI5, MI6 created the OSS, which now is the CIA, and now of course we have much more than just the CIA. We have the NSA, and we have all the FBI is acting as a surveillance uh, network. So we have many more now, but it's a coordinated effort with other intelligence outfits such as Mossad, and they're all furthering the same kind of agenda. That's not to say that there aren't warring factions, because of course people in power want as much power as they can amass, and so there does become a battle of who can lead. But all this to say that when I was talking about China being the technocratic model, I do think they're beta testing on China, and then they want to roll it out across the world. And right now we're seeing it very aggressively move through the UK with these 15-minute cities. But China also has these that really where they have a social credit system that is run under a digital currency, and they're trying to push that here. Biden did sign the bill, what was it, the executive order 14067, and that he signed on March 9th of 2022. It went into effect December, I think 13th or 15th of 2022 last year. And that was, again, this is where people tell me, oh, it's just research. It's research. I don't know why they're researching these CBDCs. We're now seeing how aggressively they're trying to push it. I would like to think that these bank collapses have nothing to do with trying to push people into larger banks and then ultimately consolidate into central bank digital currencies. But unfortunately, I think that is kind of part of their plan. And through that, they have all sorts of technology that doesn't need to even be injected, although it could be injected to trace, track, and control every single individual. And that's what's really terrifying to me.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Well, that's what we can talk about it. We can try to let everybody know, and hey, we're not crazy, folks. We've done the homework. We've read the books. We've studied it. I been studying things like, weather warfare, and a lot of
Oh
people
yeah, the geoengineering. This is
they don't want to know about it, but it's real.
it was a huge part of the Vietnam War. I don't
Yeah.
know why people think that this is just some theory. And whenever I talk about it, it's one of those things people just cannot, even people who are willing to explore other things, they will not wrap their heads around things like chemtrails. And I'm like, it's in our congressional bills.
Yeah.
If this were just some made up, cockamamie story, like it wouldn't be in our congressional bills, but it is because it's real. And there's absolutely a war in the skies. Ilana Freeland is a really good resource on some of that. But I worry a lot about what they're doing to the air quality
Yeah.
and also some of what they could be, because the technology does exist where they can spray some of this pretty pretty scary material into the air and do it through the atmosphere. So, there's only so much we can all do. We can control what we can control, but I think that, they say knowledge is power. I do think to some extent we can arm ourselves with the knowledge and then, from there take power over the things that we do have power over. We have power over, the thoughts we have, the actions we take, to some extent, the people we surround ourselves with, and yeah, so I think that those are some of the measures we can focus on, so
And how we spend our time, and how
yeah.
how we do, what you're doing, what I do, to instead of watching Netflix, we're sharing information that's really important. And I think, we're able to see each other's faces and to get a
Yeah,
sense that, yeah, I trust you. You're not making this up. This is not a production like, you might see on a big network. These are real people talking, and we really do, honestly believe we're right. But also, I think the other point that's so important is critical thinking.
yes.
And you emphasize that very well when we talk about the science versus science. And, they want to tell us that this is the science.
Oh,
And,
yeah,
you know,
the science.
as if it were something that's fixed and doesn't change, but
The first
absolutely.
rule of science is that nothing can be proven, right? What did Richard Feynman say? That there are many questions that cannot be answered, but there are no answers that cannot be questioned. I mean, that's the first premise of science. I think one of the biggest problems we're facing today is that people have engaged in scientism. And this is years and years of propaganda and conditioning. And it is literally a religiosity. It's a very religious type of view that has been. Uh, that has been espoused and permeated. And it's this idea that we should trust the science when in fact the science is not a decided entity. It's a theoretical model. It's putting forth a hypothesis and then you test it. But I wanted to say something about Netflix is programming. It is propaganda. Netflix was created by Mark Randolph Bernays, who is the nephew of Edward Bernays, who wrote Propaganda in 1948. He was also one of the forerunners of Tavistock Institute, which now called the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. In 1948, that's what it became. And that was the British Propaganda Bureau back in 1913. It was that of the Wellington House. And it is so Edward Bernays was a double nephew of Sigmund Freud. So yeah, so it is literally like a propaganda machine. So yeah,
Well,
I'm not saying that nobody can watch movies and enjoy themselves, but and then there's also the Obama connection. So yeah.
okay, well, we'll have to discuss that in more detail the next time. I hope you'll come back,
Okay.
and we'll get into some Harvey Weinstein and stuff like
Oh yeah, we can do that too.
that. Okay. Well, all right. Thank you so much, Courtney.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Have a great evening, and it's really a pleasure. CourtenayTurner.com, and I want to check out some more of your material over at your website. And good luck with all your projects. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.